Guten Abend, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren. Ich begrüße Sie sehr herzlich zu unserer 5. Vorlesung und Diskussionsseminarveranstaltung im Forschungskolleg Humanwissenschaften. Da sitze ich in der Bibliothek, wie Sie schon, wenn Sie schon bisher teilgenommen haben, mich immer auch hier identifizieren konnten. Diese Veranstaltung ist eine Kooperation zwischen dem Fachbereich 3, dem Institut Franco-Allemand in Frankfurt und dem Forschungskolleg Humanwissenschaften. Wir stellen die Frage nach den Perspektiven der Sozialdemokratie in Europa. Was sind die Perspektiven angesichts einer Situation der Sozialdemokratie in der Krise? Heute Abend begrüße ich in ganz besonders herzlicher Form unseren Referenten. Es ist Gérard Grunberg von Paris. Er wird zu uns auf Englisch sprechen und ich freue mich, Monsieur Grunberg, dass wir Sie im Rahmen unserer Reihe hier als Referenten gewinnen konnten. Es ist eine Veranstaltung, Vortrag und Diskussion, und alle, die sich von Ihnen für das Seminar angemeldet haben, können mit der Funktionstaste F und A, also Question Answer, Frage Antwort, während des Vortrags bereits schriftlich, indem Sie Ihren Namen nennen oder nicht, ganz wie Sie möchten, sich beteiligen an der Diskussion, indem Sie Fragen stellen zum Thema und an den Referenten. Diese Fragen werden dann verlesen und von den Moderatoren der Diskussion bekannt gemacht, sodass Monsieur Grunberg darauf antworten kann. Welcome to our video seminar, Perspectives of Social Democracy in Europe. Now it is my pleasure to welcome very warmly and heartily Monsieur Grunberg from Paris, and he's being introduced to you now by my colleague and friend Pierre Monnet.
Thank you. Vielen Dank, Matthias. Ich werde natürlich jetzt die Darstellung des Vortragenden auf Deutsch machen, aber ich begrüße Sie sehr herzlich auch im Namen des Instituts Franco-Allemand in Frankfurt an der Goethe-Universität. Wir hatten bisher in der Reihe sehr stark fokussiert auf die deutschen Komponente des Problems, das wir uns als Zentralthema dieser Reihe aufgegeben haben. Und dieses Mal wollten wir für eine vergleichende Perspektive Richtung Frankreich gehen. Und wenn man über Parti Socialiste, Sozialistische Partei in Frankreich, über auch die politische Landschaft des Landes nach 1945 und im Besonderen nach 1971, natürlich stoßt man sofort auf den Namen von Gérard Grunberg. Gérard Grunberg hat neben der Politikwissenschaft für sein 1965 erworbenes Diplom des Sciences Po Paris auch Wirtschaftswissenschaft und Recht studiert. Als Forschungsdirektor am CNRS und Lehrstuhlinhaber am Institut des Sciences Politiques in Paris führt er eine anerkannte wissenschaftliche Laufbahn, die ihn als einen der großen Spezialisten des politischen Lebens und der politischen Landschaft Frankreichs in der zweiten Hälfte des 20. Jahrhunderts imponiert hat. Man sieht ihn regelmäßig auch als Experte in den Medien und gehörte auch eine gewisse Zeit dem Kabinett von dem ehemaligen Premierminister Michel Rocard, als letzterer 1988 eine Regierung unter der Präsidentschaft von François Mitterrand bildete. Bis 1995 war Gérard Grunberg selbst noch Mitglied der Parti Socialiste in Frankreich und unter seinen wichtigsten Veröffentlichungen zur Lage und zur Zukunft der Linksbewegungen und Parteien in Frankreich gehören, ich zitiere, zwei wichtige Veröffentlichungen auf Französisch, Les Socialistes Français et le pouvoir, l'ambition et le remords, 2005 in Paris erschienen, La loi et les prophètes, les socialistes français et les institutions politiques, 2013 und auch, das ist ja zu merken, ein Napoléon Bonaparte. Wie Sie wissen, nächstes Jahr haben wir eine große Feier, Gedenkfeier vor uns, 200-jährige Wiederkehr des Todes von dem großen französischen Kaiser im Jahr 1821. Mal sehen, wie Frankreich das noch kommemorieren will. In seinem Vortrag geht es heute um eine immer noch schwer zu begreifende Geschichte, die einer Partei, die noch 2017, kurz vor der Wahl von Emmanuel Macron, das Amt des Präsidenten der Republik, das Parlament, die Regierung, zahlreiche Regionen, viele der größten Städte Frankreichs politisch besaß und regierte und in wenigen Monaten alles verlor und heutzutage nach Figuren, nach Programm, nach Namen sucht. Das ist eine spannende Geschichte. Et Gérard Grunberg, nous vous remercions vraiment, très sincèrement, depuis votre maison de confinement dans les environs de Bordeaux, de vous adresser à nous et je vous passe la parole. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to participate in this conference. Then as you know, my title of my presentation is the fatal crisis of the French Socialist Party. As you know, maybe in the last presidential election in 1917, the Socialist Party got only 6% of the vote, which is very incredible if you can think that only 4 years ago, the Socialist Party had the presidency, the head of government, the majority in the National Assembly. What happened? How can we explain this decline? And maybe more than a decline, it's the question which interests me today. I think this current decline has many different causes. Some are not specifically French, in fact, not specifically French, and they are, we know that, it's well documented, it's a big crisis of the whole social democracy in Europe. But I will not develop this point, we know that, and we have other conferences to make difference with other countries. Then I will insist on specific national causes in our history, causes of the decline of the French Socialist Party and the current crisis of the French Socialist Party. I think 3 periods can be identified in the history of French socialism. The first one is a period of SFIO, Section Française de l'Internationale Socialiste. As you know, the French party was created in 1905, and it was created by the unification of 2 very different tendencies of the prime socialism in France. It's very important to understand that because it's 2 tendencies. These 2 first socialist parties, different socialist parties, were very different about ideology and I should say the view of what is power, how to take power. The first one was, we say, Guédis, which was very Marxist, with Jules Gued. And this tendency was really a revolutionary in the French revolutionary tradition. Very suspicious, in fact, about representative government, parliamentary action, and even about republic itself. It was very suspicious about alliances, coalitions with other parties, even leftist parties, opposed to reformists, really ideologically revolutionary. The other tendency, the other wing of the new Socialist Party, was the Jaurèsian wing. Jaurès was the other founder of the French Socialist Party, and he was really a Republican first, I should say Republican. Of course a socialist, but a Republican. And he was very favorable to parliamentary action, and also maybe to difficult point to make alliances with other leftist party, no Marxist party. And then, of course, this synthesis, we say the Jaurèsian synthesis, which permitted to create this new party, had many flaws, many ambiguities. And I think it's important to understand what were these ambiguities, because some of them still persist, still are here, even now in the French Socialist Party. The first one, the contradiction between reformism and revolution. What meant reforming in a capitalist society for a socialist party, a Marxist party? The second one was the contradiction between patriotism and internationalism in the party. The third one was linked to the first one, how to take power gradually and peacefully, waiting the growth of the working class, or sparking a violent revolution rapidly. And the last one, maybe the more important, was the relationship between democracy and socialism. In German SPD, there was a very important debate on revisionism with Bernstein. The problem was really debated. What was socialist if we give priority to democracy? In France, we had not this debate. Even Jaurès itself didn't agree with Bernstein. He thought all were collectivist, revolutionary. It's very important to understand the way this party was created. The other feature of this party, and it was a long-lasting feature too, was it was a really weak party. When you compared the French Socialist Party with the SPD before the First World War, you see the big difference between a very big working class party linked with unions, with many activists, and the French Socialist Party, less than 100,000 members before the war, only 16% in the parliament, and always with, I call, a SPD complex. We are SPD complex. And I think the way to confront this question of the complex, the comparison with the SPD, was to be more ideological, because they were not sure of themselves, sure to be a real working party. We must know also that in 1906, that is just 1 year after the creation of the Socialist Party, the union movement decided to be autonomous, not to have organic link with the party. It was also, of course, because of fragility of the French Socialist Party. At last, just when the First World War broke, as Jaurès was assassinated. This fragile Jaurèsian synthesis did not withstand the Soviet Revolution, the Russian Revolution. It was not at all like in Germany, even if in Germany you had split also, but it's not exactly the same. In France, the whole, I should say, 2/3 of the Socialist Party decided to join the Third International. The reformism at that time was really dominated, very marginalized. And the party was more and more at that time anti-reformist, revolutionary, and Marxist. You had in Germany, in SPD, you had a character like Karl Kautsky, who really confronted the Leninist revolution and the Leninist theory. Not such thing in France, never. Even after the Congrès de Tours in 1920, when was created this Communist Party, the remaining Socialist Party was still Marxist, not really reformist, even if it was any longer after when he was on power in 1936, but it was still a Marxist party with a strong left wing, decided not to be a reformist party. Then the problem was that at that moment, after the war, the same ambiguities, in fact, appeared once more in the French Socialist Party. And with a bigger problem, a new problem for them, which was, of course, the creation and development of the Communist Party. And after the, I should say, the SPD complex, we have now a communist complex, Marxist and communist complex. And because the Communist Party will become really a worker party, of course, it was a big problem for the Socialist Party, and it didn't encourage it to be a reformist party, to abandon the Marxist theory. During between the two wars, he tried, Léon Blum was one leader of this party. He was not at all eager to exercise power because he thought exercising power was very dangerous for this party. And then he was on power only 1 year between Le Front Populaire between 1936 and 1937. That's all. And this first experience of power in 1936, in fact, was a failure from the economic point of view, and the failure about uniting the left, because very rapidly the Communist Party broke with the Socialist Party. And after the 1939 and the Pact Germano-Soviétique, of course, the disagreement was absolute. After the war, in 1945, when the Socialist Party was recreated, because it was, of course, destroyed during the war, the Socialist Party present the same ambiguities. Guy Mollet was a Marxist, he didn't want to be a reformist. And at the same time, he was obliged in 1956 for the second time to exercise power. And once again, it was a failure. Only 1 year, and after that, break of left, and the Socialist Party was in opposition. How to explain that? First, I think that, of course, it was the Algerian War, and the socialist government was unable to end this war in 56, 57. And it provoked the return of Général de Gaulle. And Général de Gaulle, for the socialists at that time, was a personal power. And this personal power was absolutely against the French socialist and republican tradition. And when Général de Gaulle installed, created the Fifth Republic, the Socialist Party was first divided in 58 in the opposition when the Général de Gaulle decided to install the election, the presidential election at universal suffrage. It was a very important moment because at that moment, the left and especially the Socialist Party were outside, were against the system, And Guy Mollet, the leader of the party, didn't understand that things had changed. We were in a new system, in a new constitution, and the presidential election would be a very important election. Mollet didn't want to present a candidate. It's the reason why in '65, it's François Mitterrand, who was not a socialist, who was picked to be the candidate of the left at that moment. That means that the Socialist Party didn't understand what was going on. It was the first thing. The second thing was still the question of reformism. In Germany, SPD, you had Bad Godesberg Congress. We had not a Bad Godesberg Congress in France. Not reflection about revisionism, about reformism, about Marxism, and the ideology of the party was still the same. Then, at that moment in the 70s, the French Socialist Party was really weakened, more and more weak. If you look at just before the SFIO was finished in 1971, the party was very weak, no power perspective, no longer a governing party, and in the presidential election in 1969, it got 5% of the vote at the presidential election. The Communist Party, 21%. But it was the end of the Socialist Party. And then it's the second period, which is the Parti d'Épinay, the party recreated, the Socialist Party recreated by François Mitterrand. François Mitterrand was not a socialist, he was not a Marxist. What interested him was govern, to be president of the Republic, and to make the Socialist Party a majoritarian party, able to govern. So that's like that. He wanted the union with the Communist Party because it was necessary for him to be able to win the election, but ideologically, he was completely different from the leftist and even socialist ideology. Then this new moment was a very successful for the new Socialist Party. Really rapidly growing, many members, good elections. Mitterrand was nearly elected president in 1974 and elected in 1981. Then, of course, we could think that this rebirth was really a new moment which could really create a long-lasting, powerful socialist party. And another feature of this new party was that it was no longer at all a worker party, but a party of middle class, new salaried middle class. Marxism was in a way replaced by cultural liberalism. But the problem is that this foundation, this recreation of the Socialist Party by Mitterrand suffered itself too many contradictions, many ambiguities, not exactly the same that the ancient one, but not completely different. And I think two of these contradictions were very important and would have very important consequences in the future of the Socialist Party. The first one was about the institution. Why? As you know, the Socialist Party didn't accept the institutions of the Fifth Republic. But at the same time, Mitterrand used them to be president. And then you had a party which didn't like the regime, didn't like the institution, did not accept the institution, but governed with this institution, inside these institutions. It was a contradiction. Not for Mitterrand, he was a big leader, not at all at that moment, but it was for the future a contradiction. How to be a big party in a political system and do not accept this political system. It was the first contradiction, in my opinion. The second one was about capitalist economy, liberal economy. At the Congrès d'Épinay in 1971, Mitterrand said, we must break up with capitalism. He was very leftist to get a majority. We are non-reformists. We must break up with capitalism. And in the same time, of course, because for the first time in the history of Socialist Party, this party could be on power for a long period, not only 1 year, 2 years, but for a long period. Of course, the contradiction broke between this anti-capitalism, anti-liberalism, and in the same time, the reformists of the socialist government. Four socialists succeeded with Mitterrand, and all more and more, of course, compromising with liberalism. Once again, it was not too dangerous when Mitterrand was there, but these contradictions were there. When Mitterrand leaves power in 1995 and the right wins the 95 presidential election, the party was, we don't know what was exactly this party. But by chance, Lionel Jospin, the leader of the Socialist Party, won the parliamentary elections in 1997 with cohabitation, Chirac, rightist president, and the socialist government, and leftist government, in fact, of Lionel Jospin. Lionel Jospin tried to resolve these two main contradictions, that is, institutions and political, economical policies. About the first one, that is problem of institutions, he decided to make accept by the socialists that the presidential election was really the main election in the system. Is the reason why he decided to put the parliamentary elections just after the presidential election. Then, in a way, he accepted, nearly accepted, the new institutions of the Fifth Republic. The second try of Jospin was about economy. At that moment was the phenomenon of Blairism, third way in Britain, at the same moment, 1997. And Jospin tried a compromise, some kind of compromise with liberal economy and the long-lasting etatist tradition in France. And he said very famous words. He said, no to yes to market economy, no to society economy, market economy, and no to society economy. No, sorry. Yes to market economy, not to market society, sorry. Of course, it was not very clear to understand what it meant exactly. It was an ideological concept. I am not sure it was something else. It was a try to make a correspondence between what they thought and what they have done. but in my opinion, it was a real difficulty for the future. When he was beaten in 2002, the things changed very rapidly inside the Socialist Party. The 2002 presidential election was a catastrophe for the left because Jospin was not able to be on the second ballot of the election. He was eliminated on the first ballot because the candidate of the extreme right, far right party, Front National, got just a little more than he did. And then it was a real crisis, of course. Jospin abandoned politics. And at that moment, the party was really upset. He didn't know where it was, but it was a reaction anti-Jospin, against what Jospin had done when he was prime minister on the two domains I mentioned, that is institutions and economic policy. In institutions, the left of the party decided to propose a project of a new republic, a new institution, the sixth republic, to replace the fifth republic, and to give the parliament and the prime minister power, not the president, to downsize the powers of the president. Which is a new evolution, backward evolution of the party. And on economic policy, helped by the worldwide financial crisis in 2008, he decided really to condemn what has done the government, the socialist government, against the compromise with liberalism. Then developed the idea inside the party, the idea of anti-liberalism, which was now the flag of the party, anti-liberalism. And at that moment, the evolution was really stopped in the Socialist Party. It was in the opposition at that time, of course. By chance, in 2012, the leader of the Socialist Party, the ancient leader of the Socialist Party, François Hollande, was elected president. And once again, the contradictions were absolutely clear. He also tried to resolve this contradiction. What were these contradictions? I told you, the first one, the institution. The president before him was Nicolas Sarkozy, who was accused to be a hyper-president, too much a president, too powerful president. And when, in this campaign, when he was candidate, Hollande said, I will be a completely different president. He said a normal president. I will be not the king, the government will govern, not the president. But of course, it was a bad idea because it was not possible in our system to have a president which decide not to be the chief of the executive power. It's not possible. It was not what the people wanted, the expectations of citizens. He decided that. And of course, it was not possible because when he was president, he was really the chief of the executive power. The second, I should say, the second contradiction, difficulty was when he was campaigning, he said, I am the enemy of finance. It was clearly leftist message, I am the enemy of finance. But when he was on power, very rapidly, I should say 1 year after that, he decided to, it was a very important turning point in the French economic policies, which was aimed to restore the economic competitivity. And it was to try business to be competitive. And then a big fraction of the Socialist Party decided to confront the president, to confront the government, saying it's not a problem of competitivity, it's the problem that the government gives money, gifts to business, gifts to capitalists. It's not possible. We can't accept that. And then from this moment, that means 2014, let's say, it was a permanent war between a part of the parliamentary group and the party and Hollande and the government. It was very, very tough because, an example, the parliament, the part of the parliamentary group tried to get a motion of no confidence of government. It was the first time in the history of the Socialist Party that such a thing happened. And the government was paralyzed. The credibility of government dropped. The popularity dropped. And the party obliged François Hollande to go through a presidential primary to be a candidate at the next presidential election of 2017. It was very difficult for Hollande, and he preferred to abandon. He preferred not to be candidate. And at that moment, the party had no longer a leader, The primary, the two main candidates of the socialist primary was really the two extremes of the party, extreme left, and with Benoît Hamon, who was one of the rebels, the frondeur of the parliamentary group, and on the other side, the prime minister, just was prime minister, who was named by the left wing as neoliberal. And in that primary, the leftist candidate won. And the campaign was very leftist. And as I told you in the beginning, the candidate, Benoît Hamon, got 6%. You have 31 deputies. We had nearly 300 in 2012. And no money, not many members, maybe 4,000 of members. And then when Macron is elected, attracting the rightist wing of the socialist electorate, the party was completely caught between a rising extreme left with Mélenchon, nearly 20% at the presidential election, and Macron, who was elected president. He decided immediately to be against Macron, try to get a new unification of the left, a leftist candidate, a unique leftist candidate, which was absolutely impossible. And today we can say that the situation did not improve. What happened next was that 5 days ago, very recently, the new leader of the party, Olivier Faure, decided that the Épinay party was over. Socialist Party was over. He said, we need a big bang, a new name, new organization. We are not the Socialist Party. We are, he said, we are the party of the Social and Ecologist Republic. That's all. We need to start afresh. The problem is what refundation on what basis? The problem, and I finish there, the problem is that besides the old contradiction, the party now is confronted to two new difficulties, very big difficulties. The first one is the weakening of the left-right cleavages, which organize the functioning of the French political system. Because the left is crushed and divided, the right is divided, and the two big governing parties are decreasing or in deep crisis. And you have no longer an organization of the political system, right and left. You have new cleavages appearing. One is difficult exactly to say, but we can try. One is universalist values and identity values. One is open country, closed country, etc., etc. And then we don't know exactly how will function the political system in the following years. But the problem is that the Socialist Party could not be able in the future to reorganize something which is the French left. The second difficulty, new difficulty, is the transformation of parties, party organizations themselves. The French Socialist Party is an ancient traditional party. In France today, not maybe only in France, but in France today, the evolution is towards what I name personal parties. If you look at what happens now in France, Mélenchon, extreme, I don't know exactly what is Mélenchon, populist, extreme left, I don't know exactly, but it's a personal party created by Mélenchon for Mélenchon. In a way, the Rassemblement National, extreme far right, is a family party with a family Le Pen. And of course, La République En Marche, the new party created by Macron, is a personal party. And the problem is that now, more and more, on the left and on the right, the future presidential candidates who want to be candidate at the presidential election, these people do not accept any longer to participate in a presidential primary. They don't want that. They prefer to go alone and say, I am candidate. And in the same time, and for this reason, the parties are not able, the ancient party are not able to organize these primaries. And the Socialist Party is very weak and it has no candidate, socialist candidate for the presidential election. And is obliged to try to attract, to support, not to design, not to say he's our or she's our candidate, no, to decide to support a candidate, a man or a woman who says, I am the candidate. The only solution for him for the moment is the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, who maybe will accept to be candidate. But even if she accepts, it's not at all, I should say, probable that she could be present in the second ballot, second round of the presidential election. And it's the reason why I am sorry to be so pessimistic, of course, but I think that the future of the Socialist Party is really not a good future for it. Thank you.
Oui, merci beaucoup. C'est nous qui devrons vous remercier pour à la fois ce tableau très clair et cette peinture d'une histoire faite de changements, naturellement, et également de succès, d'échecs, de repositionnement de ce parti socialiste en parti de gouvernement, avec naturellement toutes les contradictions que cette Position peut comporter. Also nochmal auf Deutsch. Vielen, vielen Dank, Herr Grunberg, für diesen tollen Vortrag mit der Beschreibung der verschiedenen Etappen einer sozialistischen Partei mit seiner komplexen Geschichte, die nach mehreren Evolutionen Kurven doch zu einer richtigen Regierungspartei geworden ist, aber jedes Mal auf eine Art Realität gestoßen ist und dabei intern wie extern seine kontradiktorischen Willen und Programme nicht mehr zusammenbringen konnte. Hiermit eröffne ich die Diskussion. Auf die Kolonne Frage und Antworten sind noch keine Wortmeldungen, aber das kann noch kommen. Aber zunächst wollte ich Hans-Jürgen Puhle das Wort geben für die Diskussion. Mikro aktivieren, Herr Puhle. Mikro.
Yeah, I do have quite a number of questions, and I'll start with one perhaps, which may open a broader debate perhaps. I find it very interesting to compare the road to power of François Mitterrand on the one hand and of Emmanuel Macron on the other. When Mitterrand, in order to win the presidency between 1971-74 and his final election in 81, prepared his campaign, he, in a way, hijacked the Socialist Party and then remodeled it, uniting it with some other groups and factions, and the Party Congress of 71 and so on, functionally in a similar way to how Donald Trump has hijacked the Republican Party in the United States after this party had destroyed itself and ceased to be an autonomous political actor, or an autonomous political heavyweight at least. So Mitterrand had to hijack the party in order to get the votes and to become president. Macron, on the other hand, did it on his own. He had no need to hijack the Socialist Party or any other party, at least no any other existing party. How would you explain this significant difference? Does it have more to do with factors inherent to what the Socialist Party represented at the time and represents now, or is it more, would you say that it is more, this difference is more due to the difference in the more general constellations of the political system and the party system and the interactions of the political actors in France?
Thank you. I shouldn't say exactly that Mitterrand hijacked the Socialist Party. If you look at what happened in the 60s, the Socialist Party, Guy Mollet, the leader of the Socialist Party, because, as I said, didn't accept the presidential election at the universal suffrage, did not want to present a candidate. He didn't want. Some inside the party wanted Gaston Defferre and so on, but he didn't want, because he said, we must not play this game. It's not our game. We don't want that. Then when Mitterrand decided to be candidate in 65, the leftist party, the whole leftist party, the Communist Party, the Radical Party, the Socialist Party, no one wanted to present a candidate. Then he profited by this situation. If the Socialist Party had decided to have a good candidate in 1965, Mitterrand was finished because he was very isolated at that time. It's not exactly the same. The second reason is that in that period, it's the reason why I think we are now in a new period. At that period, the concept of parties, the reality of parties exists. The party exists. No, Mitterrand was not able, he knew that without the support of the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, what he got, he could do nothing at that moment. He could not say, he was not really popular at the beginning, and he could not say, okay, I am here, I am candidate François Mitterrand. It was not possible. In 2017, the situation was completely different. First, we had presidential primary, and Macron knew he would be beaten in the presidential primary because the party was really leftist at that moment. The party hated what he has done as Minister of Finance of François Hollande. He was the author of the new turning point of economic policy. And then it's the reason why they didn't want it. He knew that. It's the reason why he created this party. But also, I think you are right. In a way, the two characters, the two men, are adventurers. People who take big risks. There are not so many. You have De Gaulle also, some, but not so many. It was a real adventure. It was incredible what he has done. Incredible. The problem of Mitterrand was unify the left. The problem of Macron thought that left and right cleavage was over. He was right in a way. It was finished. Left against versus right, finished. Then he knew that the Socialist Party was really weak, really ill, and the rightist party, UMP at that moment, was also very, very, very weak. And of course, he was not. He was beaten at the election. Then it was two different. I should say the two same adventurers are confront two very different situations, very different political systems.
J'aurais également une question à vous poser. Ich hätte auch natürlich eine Frage an Sie, Herr Grunberg. Dans quelle mesure l'évolution du Parti socialiste, notamment après la prise de pouvoir et l'importance qu'a acquis François Mitterrand au sein du parti, puis naturellement au sein du gouvernement et de la présidence, dans quelle mesure, de plus en plus, le Parti socialiste s'est aussi orienté, pas seulement en fonction de considérations internes politiques, mais également avec une politique européenne qui l'a conduit, là aussi, à devoir faire certains ajustements et renoncer à telle ou telle ambition, disons, de gauche. Also kurz zusammengefasst, die Frage ist, inwiefern neben der internen Dimension der politischen Entscheidungen und Positionierung von der französischen Sozialistischen Partei, inwiefern neben der internen Dimension die europäische Konstruktion auch dazu beigetragen hat, dass diese Partei auch an manchen Grenzen seines Programms oder seiner Wünsche gekommen ist.
Donc, en un mot, surtout, c'est que vous disiez en un mot, c'est... Ah, je vous entends pas.
Oui, voilà, ça y est. J'ai rétabli le son, c'est bon?
Vous disiez juste en un mot,
Oui.
c'était...
Est-ce qu'à côté des considérations internes de positionnement du Parti socialiste face aux institutions de la Ve République et surtout après François Mitterrand, est-ce que la construction, voilà.
If you look at the debate inside the Socialist Party about Europe, you will see that on this topic too, there are many ambiguities about Europe, because the Socialist Party will say we are European, and in a way it's true, we are pro-Euro. But at the same time, it's a very ancient thing in the party. The party always, the Socialist Party always said it's a problem with the European construction, which is that it's, some said that, not all, some said it's a German Europe. That means liberal Europe. It's a German Europe. And as you know, we had a big referendum in France in 2005 about Europe, about European constitution. And the party was absolutely divided, completely divided. And most of, as I know, most of the leftist electorate and the socialist electorate voted no in 2005. That means that this party is very, very, and the reason is, in my opinion, the fault is the French government's fault, right and left. Why? Because when there are difficulties, usually the governments say, it's not my fault, it's Commission Européenne, it's Europe fault. And then I think, even if they are, the Socialist Party, we can say is pro-European, the ambiguity is very, very large. And in fact, they did not really convince their members, then electorate, to be really pro-European. I think it's a real problem. And in the last period, when the left was dominating, you had in the left of the Socialist Party big critics about Europe, big critics about austerity, policy of austerity, and so on. Then on that topic too, the party is very ambiguous in my opinion. In the presidential campaign, the last one, the more European was Macron. And if you look what socialist electors voted for Macron on the first round, you see that they are extremely pro-European compared with the others. Wolfgang.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to listen to you and understanding a whole century of socialist failures with some short periods of success. Gérard, the main question social democracy in France and Europe is confronted with is, where is the political space for social democracy? And if I look to France, my first observation is this is one of the strange democracies where you do not have political parties anymore. Maybe this is a very German view, and maybe the only political party you have in organizational programmatic terms is the Front National. But you may correct me. But if, as you have rightly pointed out, according to my point of view, France, as well as most of the West European countries, have a two-dimensional cleavage structure. The one is a classical pro-socialist working distributional axis between left and right, between state and market. This was quite easy. Now we have this cross-cutting cleavage of what I would call a cultural cleavage between post-nation state supporters on the one side, and on the other side you have nation state supporters and sometimes nationalists there. So cosmopolitans against nation state folk-oriented communitarians. And if I look to France, I'm asking myself, where is the political space? You have a populist movement of the center. This is Macron for me. And you have a leftist populist movement with Mélenchon. And you have a right-wing populist party with Le Pen. So the question is, and this is something we all are puzzled with, where is the political space? If they move to the left, there is already Mélenchon. If they move to the center, Macron is saying, I am here. If they are becoming too ecological, then the Greens are there and not the Socialist Party. And the Socialist Party doesn't have that much credibility in ecological question. So again, is there a political space for social democracy or a socialist party in France?
Thank you, Wolfgang. I think it's a very important question. Very, very important question. As I told you, what is sure, it's that the first cleavage you named, I say left, right, if you want, this cleavage is the only cleavage which says something to the Socialist Party. It's a problem. But this cleavage is no longer able to organize the functioning of the system for the reason exactly you mentioned. That is that you have now many new cleavages. And it's not clear. You ask me to make clear the space, the political space. I am not able. It's because it's in evolution and very complex. I should add that I agree with the cross-cutting new cleavage, cultural cleavage. I absolutely agree, cultural cleavage. And this cultural cleavage is, I should say, complicated to explain why. Because you say, for instance, Macron is a populist party, populist leader, maybe LRN a populist party. It's partly true. It's partly untrue. Why? True because his campaign was a bit populist, because it was a presidential campaign against the parties, even against the representative government. The direct link between the chief and people, against the political elites, very important, against, really, I am not like you. It was some Gaullist discourse, and Bonapartist discourse too. It's a French tradition. But in the same time, if you look at the Macron electorate, you are very interested to observe that this electorate do exist ideologically. It's a real social liberal electorate, which is leftist on humanism, anti-racism, and liberal in economic matters. It's very interesting. Then it does exist. It's difficult to to preserve that, because there are many eccentric forces applying, but it's not only a populist. It's what is very interesting in this phenomenon. When you mention Mélenchon, I don't know if it's still the left. Why? First, because himself said it's finished, the left. He refused to make an alliance with, and he said all is finished. Like Macron, he said, Socialist Party is finished, Communist Party is finished. All that is old times. And he created this personal party, like Macron. Then I don't know exactly what is the extreme left now. And you know, a very interesting point, inside this movement of Mélenchon movement, LFI, la France Insoumise, you have a contradiction inside between universalists and identity partisans. And I think that Mélenchon himself is divided in two, because he's all Republicans and he defends he was on Islamophobia, we say. Then I don't know exactly what is, and because it's a personal party like Macron's one, we don't know what will happen when they disappear, the leaders disappear, we don't. And the National Front, in a way you are right, the National Front is a party. But more and more, you know, you see that now, because for the first time, inside the far right, Marine Le Pen is criticized by many people because they say she will not be elected. She will never be elected. She's not good enough to be elected. And she decided immediately, like Mélenchon, to be candidate, I will be candidate at the presidential election. But here also, in a way, I think that it's now non pas the Front National, but the Rassemblement National, le Rassemblement National, is in a way also is a personal party, because when she disappears, we don't know exactly if this party will still be the big party, because in France, as you said yourself, in France now, it depends of the candidates, because you must never forgive that our system is semi-presidential. It could not happen the same way in other European political systems. In Britain, but more complicated. But in France, it's like United States. It's not a hazard. If, like you mentioned yourself, you said, no. The problem is like in the presidential systems, the personalization of power is even more important than in the parliamentary system. It's also important in the parliamentary system, but in this system, it's very, very important. And the whole party are dying. I don't know absolutely what will happen, but I know that if a party or a nation or dying or weak party get an external candidate which look good, which would able to win, it will support. Because it's not. So what is very interesting, as I said, is that the good candidate, the real convinced candidate, good candidate, who want to be candidate, those who want to be candidate, do not want to be constrained by the laws, the regulations of the party. They don't want to be candidates at the primary. Macron didn't want to be candidate in a primary. Mélenchon didn't want to be. Le Pen did not want to be. And if Hidalgo, the socialist mayor of Paris, is candidate, she will not be the candidate of the party. The party will support it. And on the right, we don't know exactly the same problem. We don't know who will be the candidate. Then I absolutely agree with you, the question of the cross-cut cleavages, the problem of we don't know exactly what is the space or the organization of the political system. That's true. But as you said, I think that the poor Socialist Party, the poor remaining Socialist Party, does not fit with the evolution of cleavages.
Gibt es vielleicht noch andere Fragen aus unserer Runde?
We have a question here from the auditorium, which I find quite interesting because it refers to the general problem Wolfgang Merkel has addressed. Dennis Kuh is asking whether the structural findings Wolfgang has mentioned, that if we look at things as they are, there doesn't seem to be any political space left for social democracy as we have understood it so far. And Dennis Kuh now asked whether this impression of structural findings could be modified by constellations of given moments, of a given situation. For example, by the emergence of a charismatic figure like Mitterrand turned out to be in the end. And he also asks whether Macron's current rightist deviation could mean a reactivation of liberal leftist or social democratic voters for a PS-like option. What would you say to that, Gérard?
Yes, it's I could answer a bit more to Wolfgang about the space of the Socialist Party.
Yeah.
I think the Socialist Party, and Wolfgang knows that very well, and not only the French Socialist Party, when they were in difficulty in the 70s, was reconstructed, rebuilt, electorally speaking, with a new middle class. It was no longer the working class parties, but new middle class, liberal, cultural, and so on. It was, and then the space of social democracy was, because there was a link, possible link, between these new social classes and a part of the popular classes. Okay, it was that. And the cement, the possibility to go together, in my opinion, was the anti-liberalism, because both were anti-liberal. I think that now the popular classes are no more interested, no longer very, I should say, interested by the leftist, anti-capitalist ideology, because they are much more interested about more largely the globalization, the national problem, immigration, Islam, and so on. And the other part, the bourgeois, petit bourgeois part of the middle class who were socialists, a part of them, as I told to Wolfgang, are voted, I don't know next time, but last time they voted for Macron because they didn't agree with anti-liberalism. They thought that it's a new era, it's an era of liberalism, you can't be against that. It's the reason why the space free for a socialist party is so small now, so small because you can't aggregate enough diverse electorates in this party. It's not possible to Mitterrand was able because Mitterrand made a very big difference between ideology and political action. He was a magician, he was very good, he managed that. But today, it's very difficult to do that. And I think that the loss of popular classes and the loss of middle class classes, the result is the narrowing of the socialist space.
We also have from the auditorium some more questions. There is one, Sandra Eckert has asked, why do the skeptical anti-European votes go more to the Rassemblement National than to the left, be it either Mélenchon or kind of a potential remodeled PS alternative? This could be linked to another question we have from Maria Rios Neuhaus, who asked whether you could elaborate a little more on your statement that the chances of Anne Hidalgo are rather bleak in comparison.
Yes, first, I am not sure. I don't know, because as I said, the situation is so open, all is open. Then I'll say that with caution. The problem is, as I told you, the problem is that the PS has no candidate. Okay. The polls, the opinion polls show that if Anne Hidalgo is not the candidate supported by the Socialist Party, the risk for the Socialist Party is to get less than 5% of the vote. And it's a very big risk. The polls show that she could perform now 9%, but if she really say I am candidate, develop his campaign, she could do more, of course. But as you know, as you maybe know, the whole left now, it's about 30% in France. All. You have the ecologists who will have a candidate, but I am not sure they will be good because they are generally bad. Generally bad. I don't know what they will do, but there will be an ecologist candidate because the ecologist party thinks that they are the new ideology. They can attract many voters. That you have that. Mélenchon will perform 10%, 11%, 12%, I don't know. Then the space, even for a good candidate, and I think Hidalgo would be the best candidate. The best candidate would be maybe more, but I don't think she will be on the second round on the election. The problem of Hidalgo is the following one. I know that very well. Hidalgo is under pressures, big pressures of the Socialist Party, his husband, who is one of the leaders of the Socialist Party, to be candidate. Because, as I told you, if she is not candidate, no candidate. Of course, it's agreeable to have people who tell you, be candidate, please be candidate. I am not sure she really want to be candidate, because to be a good candidate at the presidential election, you need to want it very, very much. I am not sure she wants that. She's ambitious. Maybe she plays with this idea, and maybe she will be candidate under the pressures. Maybe she will be candidate. I don't deny that. But I am not sure she is really, she wants that very, very hard. And as I told you, even she's a good candidate, the space, as I told to you and Wolfgang, the space is not very big. The space is not very big. then she also can say to herself that she is candidate and she is eliminated on the first round. It's not a very good thing for her. But what I think, if I must say something about that, what I think is that she will be probably a candidate. The problem that the space, even if she's good, I don't know, good candidate, the space is not very big.
Wolfgang.
I have a more simple empirical question, Gérard. The working class. If we assume the working class is about 15% of the population, or maybe a maximum 20%, where, for which party does the working class vote?
It's very
one point, Gérard, the background of the question is there is a debate now among electoral researchers in Zurich and other cities, and they argue if the social democratic parties would move more to the left and would move more in a Mélenchon style to a nation state oriented social democracy, then they would lose more votes to the Greens and to the center than they can win. Is it the same case in France as well?
In France, it's very clear. The working class does not vote Mélenchon. Does not vote Mélenchon. It's tout petits bourgeois who vote Mélenchon. The workers heavily vote for the Rassemblement National. Rassemblement National. Why? Because for the working class now, the enemy is no longer the owner, the capitalist, it's the stranger, the immigrant. And it's absolutely clear in all the polls and inquiries which has been made here. Then the problem is, the problem for the Socialist Party, to answer your question, I don't think going leftward will be really beneficial. I am not sure at all. Even I think Mélenchon is in a very bad situation. Bad situation. Because he's maybe strange to say that, but I think Mélenchon is not enough anti-immigration to expand its party and its electorate. It's not at all. He is originally he's anti-racist. He's anti-racist. He's still on the left on that topic. And then I think it's the reason why some people, some friends of mine ask me sometimes, is it not an hypothesis, a possibility to a unification between the populist right and the populist left, between Mélenchon and Le Pen? But it's not possible, and it will not be possible because this problem of immigration, absolutely impossible. And then it's the reason why now in France now, don't forget that the general electoral space, the right, extreme right, far right, it's center right, it's 65% of the electorate. French is rightist now, clearly. And you add Macron, about 20-25%, and the rest is the left. But the right is very, very, very important now, but divided, like the left, divided. It's the chance of Macron, who is not very popular, as you know, is not popular, not very popular. But he has nobody against him in front of him, absolutely nobody. For the moment, maybe in the next year, we will see new things appearing, but I don't know.
May I intervene with one more question, Pierre?
Oh, sorry.
Ah, okay.
Ja, wir haben noch, glaube ich, zwei Fragen aus dem Publikum in der Kolonne. Außer Sandra Eckert war eine Frage von Frau Rios-Neuhaus und schon auch eine erste von Denis Kourou.
Die haben wir aber schon behandelt.
Gut. Ja, ich dachte, ja. Also ich hätte selbst noch eine kurze Frage, weil wir natürlich in Deutschland sind und Herr Grunberg, ich vais traduire, hein, aber Sie haben in Ihrem Vortrag von der SPD, von Bad Godesberg natürlich gesprochen, warum eigentlich innerhalb Europa und dadurch, dass Deutschland und Frankreich sich so genähert haben, haben wir nicht eine Entwicklung der Sozialistischen Partei, die sich nach dem Modell der deutschen SPD orientiert hätte. Also das heißt, gab es wirklich oder gibt es immer noch eine Beobachtung, ein Transfer zwischen den beiden sozialistischen Parteien? Donc, comme nous sommes en Allemagne, ma question portait sur la manière dont le Parti socialiste français regardait la SPD allemande, son évolution après Bad Godesberg, etc. Et pourquoi, au fond, ce modèle de la social-démocratie allemande ne semble pas vraiment avoir pris dans le cœur même du Parti socialiste français.
Oui, yes, you are right. You are right. As I told you, first, I think that because the French Socialist Party was weak compared with the SPD and other social democratic parties, it insists very much about ideology to exist, and then Marxist, anti-reformist, and so on. So the evolution of the SPD was not for the French Socialist Party a good evolution. When Mitterrand rebuilt the French Socialist Party, a large left of the Chevènement and others, not Rocard, but Chevènement and others, criticized very much the democratic, the SPD, because they said the SPD is in a way, is a liberal party. It's not a socialist party. And so some said, named the Germano, the Europe Germano-American, and the Socialist Party. In the Socialist Party, when I was young, in the 70s, the new Socialist Party of Mitterrand, inside the Socialist Party, to be, I am social democrat, was an insult. It was an insult. We Rocardiens, I was with Michel Rocard, we Rocardiens, we were insulted as social democrats, that is rightist, pro-capitalist. And then they were never, as far as I know, there were never real links, important links between the Socialist Party and the German SPD. I think the best link was between the French right, center-right, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and Mitterrand also. But Mitterrand was not a socialist, as I told you. He never was a socialist. But Mitterrand was European. Mitterrand was not at all against and he was good. But Giscard was a good friend of the German socialist. I don't remember his name, but no, the French Socialist Party did not like social democracy. Didn't like, unfortunately.
This brings me to the question I wanted to put forward. well, the Parti Socialiste did not need a Bad Godesberg because they did not have before the detailed, explicit programs, Marxist-inspired programs the SPD had and wanted to overcome together with a number of older traditions. And if we look at the different types of European social democratic parties, I think we more or less can differentiate between 3 or 4 types. We have apart the British Labour Party, which is quite different because it functioned through decades of the 20th century as kind of the political committee of the much more powerful labor unions, and has quite a different history. Then they have the Northerners, the Scandinavians, and we have the Central Europeans, which were a bit more bureaucratized than the Scandinavians, but a bit similar to them in Austria and in Germany particularly. They were builders of structures. They were in alliances, strong alliances with the labor unions. They were building up party bureaucracies and party institutions, and a whole segment of corollaries of labor class, working class culture around the party and the milieu it represented. And then we have the Southern Europeans embodied in the Spanish PSOE, which were more kind of loosely coupled mobilizers and ad hoc assembleístas with quite a different competition in the anarcho-syndicalists, which were more stronger than they were. And the French socialists are somewhere in between and somewhere at the side in a way, in a constellation in which the communists were stronger usually, and they had other competitors in the center, the radical socialists in the Fourth Republic, the Monnet's France radical socialists, which in Spain did not exist, at least not in the 20th century that much. So my question would be, Gérard, where exactly are the French socialists in between, let's say, the Northerners and the Southerners in Europe? We have a lot of very detailed studies on the SPD on the one hand and on the PSOE on the other. We do not have these kind of detailed organizational studies of the PS, at least not as far as I know. And so my question would be, you said they were weak. Yes, of course, even comparatively compared to the other socialist parties in Europe. But what would you say regarding the Fourth and the Fifth Republic? How much structure was there? How much bureaucracy? How much organization and how much institutionalization of the Socialist Party?
First, I think that the Socialist Party, and it's the reason why I should say, in a way, it's part of the Southern Europe group of parties, socialist parties. The big problem of this party, big problem, was the Communist Party. It was absolutely crucial because the SPD was able to transform itself because it was very strong, very big party. It did exist. It did exist. It was absolutely clear this party existed. It was a true big party and unions, worker, and so on. In France, the French Socialist Party was always obliged to demonstrate it was important compared with the Communist Party. It could have done exactly the other choice that the Socialist Party in Italy have done in the 70s. It could have said, okay, we are completely different of the communists, and then we are completely different, and we are like social democracy, Northern social democracy. But in France, it was not possible because the other cause, which is the French Revolution. The Socialist Party was a revolutionary party because historically, there was a strong link with the French Revolution. It couldn't be, even now, Mélenchon, who was Trotskyist, not communist, but Trotskyist and socialist and so on, Mélenchon today will say the big man in France, in French history, is Robespierre. And the Communist Party was Robespierrist. It's the French Revolution. It was not possible in France to be leftist and not to be revolutionary. In words, ideologically, of course. It's that. Then I think it's the main reason. Then if you do the two reasons. First, the Republican tradition. Two, the weakness of the party. And compared with the SPD and French Communist Party, it was very important for this party. The identity of this party was not like in Germany, not only the ideas, but the party itself. In France, to exist, to pretend to exist, you are obliged to say ideologically, we don't forgive our original ideas. We are not a liberal party. We are not, they are no longer Marxist, but there is a superego Marxist still there. They did not abandon completely the Marxism. It's not true. Then I think it's the reason why the French Socialist Party is, I could say, in the group of the Southern Party, because the Southern Party were not very strong. Italy and Spain, communists were there, and in my opinion, I don't know if I'm right, but I think the Republican tradition, the Republican ideology, French ideology, was very much more important, influential in the Italian socialists and Spanish socialists that in Germany or in Britain or in the northern countries. I think it's this influence of the French Revolution which is very important. J'entends pas.
Voilà. Merci beaucoup, Gérard Grunberg. Nos profonds remerciements pour cette Präsentation et le Débat. Herzlichen Dank auch an alle, die mitdiskutiert haben. Danke an alle, die sich eingeschaltet und zugehört haben, an die Kollegen und den Staff im Forschungskolleg Humanwissenschaften für die konzeptionelle und koordinierte Vorbereitung, auch an den technischen Staff, auch an den Staff des Institut Français. Ich darf ankündigen, die Reihe geht weiter. Wir werden den 6. Vortrag in unserer Reihe, Perspektiven der Sozialdemokratie in Europa, am 3. Februar des nächsten Jahres haben. Das wird der Vortrag von Wolfgang Merkel sein mit dem Thema Varieties of Decline, Ende der Sozialdemokratie, Fragezeichen, auch per Video wie dieser Vortrag. Wir planen, die Reihe fortzusetzen im Sommersemester. Die Termine und der Modus werden noch im Einzelnen bekannt gegeben. Es wird mindestens per Zoom stattfinden, wie bisher, eventuell auch gemischt, wenn das möglich ist und sich ergeben sollte. Im Moment bleibt mir außerdem Dank an alle, besonders an Gérard Grunberg, Ihnen allen unsere besten Wünsche namens aller Veranstalter, unsere besten Wünsche für die Tage, die da kommen zu sagen und alles Beste für das neue Jahr zu wünschen. Alles Gute, schöne, wahre und erfreuliche für Sie im neuen Jahr und bleiben Sie gesund. Schönen Dank.
Merci, évidemment, Gérard Grunberg, encore en français, je le redis, au nom des institutions qui organisent cette série. Et nous avons là, pour la première fois, donc un exposé qui nous a permis de pouvoir comparer la situation allemande avec la situation française. Et nous allons continuer ce tour d'horizon européen. Merci de l'avoir commencé, en tout cas. Bonne soirée.
Merci beaucoup pour votre invitation. Merci beaucoup.